Hi, Beth. I want to introduce you to the listeners and tell them a little bit about you before I officially welcome you to the screen and we hear from you about your poetry. So, Beth Jacobs is with us today. She lives in Evanston, Illinois, and she's been a poet for quite a while. I am going to read you her bio, which I find lovely. Beth Jacobs is a lifelong writer of nonfiction and poetry and has published the following books: Writing for Emotional Balance, The Original Buddhist Psychology, A Buddhist Journal, and Long Shadows of Practice, Poems. She has also compiled and edited 4 books of community poetry from her work facilitating expressive writing groups, the most recent entitled The Sound of Unspoken Things, Poems of the Tuesday Writers Retreat. You can reach her and learn about the new book that we'll be discussing today, Luminous Loves Grey, at bethjacobsbooks.com. Welcome. I'm excited to talk about poetry with you. So, should we just plunge right in and have you read a couple of poems
Sure.
from Luminous Loves Grey?
I would love to, and I want to thank you again because really you have been a resource throughout my life, my writing life, and so I kind of try to follow in your footsteps a lot, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk. So let me see. I had a couple of poems I thought it would be good to start because one is kind of about purpose and one's kind of about process. So I'll start with the one about purpose. It's called Opalescent. Anger is crouching lower and lower these days, and even the babies are crying with a switchblade in the fist. Evil gods are life-jacking back where youth bloomed while the old work to remember hope and hold it potent. You have to take a teardrop off the bottom of the glittering icicle onto the tip of your tongue and swallow hard. The prism splays a rainbow in your gut. It's an unseen homeopathy against darkness. When you speak, all the colors flare out with your words.
Thank you.
Bless.
I'm so taken with the imagery in there. We have crouch as a verb, which is very visual. Um, we have the switchblade in the fist of the babies who are even crying in anger. We have, did you say life jacking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
life.
Very strong
Mhm.
motion. Um, the teardrop on the tip of the icicle and having to swallow hard. Um, it's so small and yet it's so cold and yet
Mhm.
it's so important and it's maybe our size job in a very outsized, dangerous world. So I love though that in the end the colors flare.
Yeah,
So thank you. It
yeah.
you've
Thank
put
you.
my feet in the horror and its difficult times, and you've taken them into the air. So maybe I can fly with this. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's the most beautiful thing that could happen with a poem. And yeah, for you to feel that, I mean, the poem really is about that. Exactly what you're capturing, just the kind of despair we can feel and the kind of minuscule potency of our hope.
Yeah, but it's potent, and that's a
Yes.
word you use in here. And
Yeah. Yes.
so what I love about this poem is just what we were talking about, but also that it mixes words that I understand with words that just reach me, like the switchblade and
Hmm.
babies. Um, and so it makes the words that are more abstract more powerful because I know the source of them right from
Yeah.
the poem. So thank you. And I think you have a second one to read to
Yes,
us
I
now.
do. This one is called Listening Skills. It's a little funny, I think, and it's literally was inspired by a dream that you'll hear about in the poem. My dreams are writing poems now and trying to send them back to me. My waking self, 99.9% oblivious, mixes them up with junk mail on the floor, recycling without reading until maybe their millionth try. Something so generous and persistent burns with a sourdough incense smell. Why wait so long to recognize the embers of sustenance that I meet with the kindling of my body and life? Extinction is not the end of the source, but the hint of imagination's birthing. In my dream, I wrote the word vehicle in caps and vertical, like Michael McClure. An extra V on the bottom said it will start again. All the nonsense and violence riding me, along with the prescience and particulars of every coasting metaphor in air. Vehicle and purpose alighting right here.
I love the dreams are writing poems and sending them back to you, but
Yeah,
99% of the time we seem not to be
oblivious.
listening, and they have to give us something that triggers. I mean, the vehicle, seeing that vertically in a poem, and then, or a dream that you know is writing a poem, and then finding the poem is so so skillful. And I really admire the title Listening Skills because you have to listen to the dream, you have to listen to the poem, you have to listen with the images, to the images, the embers of sustenance. It almost sounds like a book title if you want to call your next book that.
Uh-huh.
Embers of Substance. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Beautiful. And that skill you have of just mixing the the intangible with the very tangible is so apparent in here, even from the title vehicles, or I mean not the title, but the image from the dream.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. The
yeah,
dream gave it to me. And
right.
vehicle is such a great word. I had been reading Michael McClure, so I kind of had this, idea
Yeah,
from that. But vehicle is such an important word because that's what these are. We kind of, wait for the ride
right,
of the
right,
poem.
right. And allow ourselves to take it, which is not
Yes,
always easy. Um, so listening skills means a lot here because this poet is listening to the word vehicle
right.
and to her dreams. And we all have to do this to write. We have to listen to what our words are doing and
Hmm.
put aside what any intention we have that they should be doing something else or people would like it better if, um, yeah,
Yeah.
we
And
just have to
and
follow them.
Yeah, as putting aside even a certain kind of ownership of the words, like when you just love how you said something, well, it might not work. And, there's a combination, it is, my pen and hand moving, but there really is like this kind of opening to what is coming. And, I sometimes feel a slightly queasy feeling when I'm waiting for a poem, waiting for a first line. And I kind of will I have a joke in a poem I wrote, I think it's a joke out recently about all these lines auditioning for the first line, and I send them away, thank you, we'll call you, you know. But you kind of wait and then you're like, yes, that's the poem that needs to start.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a body experience, isn't it?
Yes,
Not a
it
head.
is.
So did you write that poem about the lines auditioning?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
fabulous.
I yeah, I did. I said something like maybe about 44 lines audition for the one that you just see above or something. Yeah, it's a little bit clearer. It was hard to make that idea clear, but
Well, it's clear to me. I really like it. I'm sure
yeah.
it's an entertaining poem. So when I looked at your book, um, Luminous Loves Grey, I have well, first of all, a question which we can actually circle back to, which is gray, because right here in the poem, one of the poems you read, we've got color, but we'll come back to that. But I want you
Mhm.
to know I was very aware of that. But I was also aware that the book is structured in sections. One is called approaching, then entering, then diving, then swimming, and I was set up by that to look inside the sections for such things. And I would like you to talk a little bit about that arrangement and how you came to it.
Yeah, it was hard deciding what went where, but those for, words are like really important skills that I think are kind of underdeveloped in our culture. Just like carefully approaching something, so just, psh, and then entering with a kind of generosity and depth, moving deep. And then swimming is kind of about, flowing with, moving with. So those verbs came about after I had been working on arranging this book. I had a file. And I had some time in a wonderful writing residency at Lakeside Inn in Union Pier, Michigan. And and I also had a huge floor of a ceramic studio where nobody was working. So I had everything I needed to arrange. I had like 300 poems that had collected in files. And so I first kind of sorted through, and there were a few sorting throughs, and I was arranging them on the floor of this studio, and they were kind of making waves. So I was aware that this was kind of a water-based book, and the residency was on the shores of Lake Michigan, so beautiful. And so at first it was kind of just going in waves, and then the verbs kind of came to me, and I thought that they could be sort of like waves in themselves, and I tried to put the poems that exemplified those kind of actions together. But they overlap, and that was hard. But then the title actually occurred to me on the beach, and many of my poetry friends have told me it's like not a good title and it's hard to remember and say and everything, but I just haven't been able to call it anything else. So I was on the beach, and it was one of those days where the water was so bright green and the sky was so heavy gray.
Mm.
And I thought, I looked at the horizon and I thought, what is that relationship? What is that? And I just thought there's nothing you can say but that is a form of love,
Ah,
looking at the horizon. So I called it Luminous Loves Grey for that. And that we need, maybe it's kind of like what you're saying about the kind of day-to-day imagery and the more ethereal imagery, but we can't be in one or the other. We
right,
are where
right.
they meet.
Exactly. And I don't think it's hard to say.
Oh, good.
This looks great.
Thank
It's provocative in terms of, what does that mean? But the
you. Yeah.
more I read your poems, the more I learn about the way they're put together. I see, like it's just that phrase, forgetting and knowing and forgetting. Um, One of them, it, how could we have something luminous if we didn't have any contrast?
Mhm.
So it makes sense, and I'm glad it was the lake that inspired that for you.
Yes.
And that's a fun story. It's fun to know that. I think
Mm.
it works.
Yeah. I
Um,
spend as much time as I can by Lake Michigan.
yeah, yeah. Where we are is our setting, our place feeds
Right.
us, and it's also often, if it were
Yes.
fiction, it would be a character,
Yes.
But
And you're
it
on
is
water.
almost.
You're on
It's
an
a
island.
watermark in our
Yes.
poems. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, good. So, I want to talk to you about Buddhism because it's in your book titles, and it's to me in a lot of the way you speak about love and generosity and kindness. Tell me about that practice in your life.
Oh boy, that's a huge one. Uh, I try not to, when I was a therapist, I tried not to proselytize, so you need to meditate, and in my poems, I try not to preach Buddhism. But I'm so infused with the practice that it's just part of what I do and part of how I experience everything. So, I actually got into Buddhism from psychology. I was doing research and I thought, that's interesting. I should check out meditation. And then I just sat somewhere for like 3 years without any Buddhist education. And then I started saying, something's happening to me from this practice. I'd like to know more about that. So then I just got very deeply into it. Um, and um, the just the opening to creativity in Buddhism is kind of unlike anything else I've ever experienced. There's there is this kind of capacity that I feel that I've learned through Buddhist study and practice. That I guess what I was saying about putting ownership aside is really kind of the core of it. And there is a generosity in these practices, a generosity to the moment and to your experience, and kind of getting yourself out of the way. And that does nothing but help my poetry, I feel.
That's right. And those of us who write poetry, but maybe aren't studied in Buddhist practice, I think have that same experience.
I think
And
so too.
we we carry with us the two minds I always think about, the
Mhm.
the Sein mind, I call it the image making mind, the dream mind, um, and the schooled mind, let's call it that. The editorialized mind, the mind that just wants to summarize and go on, the mind that wants to sound smart. And that mind is not in the moment, but it is the mind that makes our moment clear in the end, right? It's
Yes.
valuable and important. And David Wagner, the great poet David Wagner, was a teacher of mine, and he introduced to the class the idea that writing was done in three parts to him. The first part was invention. I always imagine it as like a mad scientist running around a laboratory. Everything's bubbling, spilling, maybe even exploding. Dangerous place, but there and important. And then the second stage was shaping, looking at that invention, the crazy as it may seem, and seeing is there a shape in here, listening to the words, figuring out where the power is in the images, not the intention, and then editing, because we can't just throw an explosion around and think that that's a poem, but we have to recognize the embodiment it's making of an experience and make that poem, sculpt that poem so that it can do that. And that's the shaping. And then the editing just, it's just at the end.
Mhm.
And too many of us, because of our judgment, which editorializing is always a judgment, um, do it too soon. It's like my vision of it. I have two visions of judgment. One is delete, 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 delete,
Yeah.
because we can't stand to see something on the screen that maybe would have proven valuable if we had let the mess be there, or the scratching it out, crumpling up the paper and throwing it in the trash can thing, or the second grade teacher on my shoulder with a red pencil
Yeah.
telling me that everything's wrong, basically, and that editor isn't the one we want interfering with our process. The one we want is at the very end that says, you could have a stanza break here. This line could be shorter. Um, Maybe the spelling of that word isn't okay. Maybe you called it razor ants, but maybe they're really called cutter ants. Look it
Mhm.
up.
Mhm. Mhm.
That one happened to me
Yeah.
recently. Um,
That's a good one.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I think that there's a simpatico between
Yeah.
writing poetry and the practice that you learned. And um, many of us have struggled many years before we could get to that place where we could write without intention. Um, and maybe you have a head start because of
Well, I don't know it because I think in a way it's just, a different, there's so many ways to arrive there and to describe it. And I love the way you just described it. That was really beautiful because that is very accurate. And I think it's really saying the same thing.
yeah. And it
Do.
takes a while to be able to see that and to make yourself available for that when you're writing. And another, I mean, I think a lot in images from life that tell me about my writing experience. And one
Mm.
is my husband was writing a technical book, and he was also traveling and teaching about computer networking, and he had a deadline. So and he's messy. So he would come home and he would look at his desk, which by now is piled up with mail from when he hadn't been home and all kinds of things. And he would take his hands and he would push it all aside and he'd start typing. I went, is it that easy?
That's so amazing.
So it's a metaphor for me.
Yes.
Yes, you can just do that. You can just push all that editorializing away. And sometimes I thank the editor and I say, I'll need you, please. Let me give you something to work with.
Mhm.
And that seems to quiet the war that
Yeah.
goes on between these minds.
That's so wonderful. I mean, just the way you do the image is so bodily. Yes, that's exactly.
So, yeah, so
Yes.
I want to
What a
encourage,
skill. What
yeah,
a skill he has.
everybody listening to us. You can write poems if you want to.
Yes.
Really can. You can write lyric prose if you
Yeah.
want to. There's
Yes.
nothing keeping you. And Beth, I know you're going to read more poems to us, and they're going to show you the way. I promise you. So why don't we pick up with a couple more poems?
Another poem. Well, I just want to say how much I really agree with that. And I do a lot of writing groups and I work with kids and grandparents. And, I always say I don't teach anybody anything. I just try to get out of the way. That
Mhm.
is really what you're saying too. Okay, so I think this might continue with the theme a little bit. This poem is called You Can't Prove Anything. And it's kind of about it's a bit about like communication. I wrote it for a friend who was having a lot of trouble with her husband. Just that frustration of like you want to get something across. And I was thinking how that frustration could occur on so many levels. So you can't prove anything. The frustration of the sane in crazy land is a raging fire, fat helicopter loads of forceful water to contain, but it never goes out or cools. That prescient child with churned up parent feels it in the neck straining forward because they can't explain the obvious or join the charade parade of platitude. Sometimes even the trees we don't believe must stamp the feet of roots and soil, watching us running like squirrels, only with less efficiency and purpose. How the angels must squeeze their fists and saints gnash teeth and devas cry at times, but they keep sending us the invisible notes of tune and paper, reminding us we know and forget over and over, sending twinkles up and down spider webs, holding our attention until the ink dries for a moment of truth to ease the deep sigh.
And it makes me sigh. Thank you. And here again, you've just mixed up the quotidian with
I
the
love it.
esoteric. We have angels and spider webs and helicopters and loads of water and squirrels. We run like squirrels, but less skillfully. Um, it's
Yes.
so wonderful to have that experience because it brings me back to not only can we do this in poetry, have him trust our images and collect them and have them be part of experience, but it is the experience of living in the world, um,
Yes.
and living, understanding the deeper part of ourselves and understanding how shy it may be. Um, so I really like that. And that word prescient popped up again. And
Yes.
you're making me think of two things from a book called Triggering Towns by the poet Richard Hugo. It's a small book. It's about him being blocked, having writer's block, and going to all these little towns in Montana. He was teaching in Missoula. He takes a break and he goes to all these towns and he gets poems. And I mean, they come to him from the new people, the new landscape, all that stuff. And he calls it triggering towns because what he's saying is we need triggers in order to write.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he also says in that book that poets, the two things I take away from that book, other than what it was up to, are poets usually have around 5 words that are very loaded emotional words to them, and those words pop up. Doesn't mean that they're repetitive. It doesn't mean that they don't belong there. It means that the poet has a kinship with those words, and they produce in the experience. And the
Yeah.
other thing he said that I just love, and I'm paraphrasing, so my example might be different than his, but that poets are cynics, maybe the original cynics, because to them, something like a spoon may be as important in a poem as the stars. And I'm feeling that way when I listen to your imagery. Spider waves, helicopters, angels, they're all important to the poem. All of
Yes.
it. So I wonder
Yeah.
if you want to address any of that as it
Well,
comes to in
I
writing.
love how you talk about it, and I agree with it so much. I kind of just feel like, amen, I agree. We move back and forth continuously, and we can't ask ourselves to control that or be in one place or another. Um, but we do move from the shy and open, kind of depth to the necessities of arrangement and detail. I mean, that's just what we do, but it is in the poem to appreciate them kind of simultaneously. It's almost the opposite of cynicism to me to say that everything is important
Yeah, yeah,
because it really is.
right.
Yeah.
Knowing and forgetting, and then makes me think of John Keats in his letter to his brother. He talks about how a poem succeeds to the extent that it can hold one thing and its opposite. And he named that negative capability. And
Yes.
I love even just saying that negative capability. It's kind of,
Mhm.
what's that mean when you first come
Yeah.
across it, right?
It's a
But the
wonderful
ability
phrase. Yeah.
to have everything, our experience is composed of everything, and yet the shaping has to happen. We can't just like
Right.
throw the kitchen sink into
Mhm.
it, right?
Mhm.
Can't do
There's,
that. We have to
yeah.
sort it out so that the the images that we're piling on come to something. right? And if
Yes.
they don't, then they're another poem, you know,
Right.
right?
Right.
So,
Right. And everything isn't the same as random.
right,
Yeah.
right, because that's who we are, right?
Yeah.
We 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 strive for some coherency,
Right.
strive for meaning, but
Hmm.
those things can be competing with each other. Sometimes the search for meaning makes us feel like we're not like we're in chaos, right? But
Hmm.
that's just the search part. In the end, our poems, if we listen, the listening skills part you talk about, bring that into meaning. So I really, really appreciate what you're doing in your poetry.
Yes,
Um,
and I'm quoting you when I say the writing is wiser than we are. Like I do feel that, I look back and sometimes maybe that's why prescient came up twice, I
yeah.
look back, the poem is prescient,
Uh-huh.
I can't
Right.
believe the poem knew that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really true. I
Hmm.
think I'd advise anyone to look at earlier work and see what's in there because even if you don't think it culminated in a finished piece, it had some information. It always does.
Absolutely.
Meaningful, even to predict the future kind of information.
Hmm. Hmm. Sometimes.
Right. So, speaking in that way, I think that it would be really good for me to say that you have woven in process, the experience of process. It just seems so deeply and easily and naturally woven in to your work. Um, and I really admire that.
Oh,
I
thank
feel like reading the different titles to the different sections of your book and then moving through the poems, each poem, I feel like someone's revealing not only the experience, but the process towards having it or rehaving it. As you know, when we write, we're living a second time.
you. Yeah.
So it's been a very, for me, uh, wonderful morning to start off this way and
Oh,
to have
thank
poetry at
you.
the center of my morning. So
Yes.
I'm wondering if there's anything else you want to tell us.
Maybe could I throw another poem in?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's see. So this one is called Word for Color. I think that it kind of brings together some of what you're talking about so beautifully. Word for color. Some color you see is so sure of itself, it enters your eye without asking permission. There may be 2.5 billion people on Earth sleeping right now, easy and vulnerable limbs akimbo. Every language bubbles and fizzes underneath. Usually we merely ride its tonality. Shadows, as well as light holes in shadows, are not things, but wondrous animations. A bird song or the rumble of a passing train can equally pull up any bunch of words. There are joys embedded in every leaf, ready to unfold into a transparent river. This river is washing our lives now and carrying us to the white light that is all possible feeling ablaze.
Wow. There you have, again, given me the process. I think about leaves and how they're colorful, but when they die, they do if linger and lose their color and become invisible, but they still hold what you're saying, all this experience, all these words. And I just find that a really invigorating poem. Uh,
Oh, thank you. Thank you so
and
much. I feel that, it's the kindest gift, as you know, being a poet, to receive a poem well. And I nobody does it like you. I mean, I really
well, thank
appreciate it.
you. Um,
Really, you really do receive it with a
I love poetry.
yeah.
I just think it's the source of so much. And I'm so proud of our country for having poet laureates. Our not only a national one, but towns have them,
Yeah.
states have them, and raising the torch of poetry or carrying it is so great because
Yes.
so in our time going to school, it was not something that people felt could be part of their lives. It was
Mhm.
something in a literature class. It was something we didn't understand, even though we were supposed to. It was something we were supposed to dive into and
Mhm.
forget about the experience of it, but talk about the logistics of the poem and its foreshadowing and whatever. And to get to that
Yeah.
place where people are just appreciating poetry is so, so wonderful. I want to thank you so much. I want to repeat the name of your book, which is Luminous Loves Grey.
I have a bunch of authors' copies of Luminous Loves Grey. This is it. And maybe about a dozen. And I just wanted to say that if anybody would like a copy of it, I would be happy to mail it to you. And I would like to ask you to, donate the price or whatever, or some time to, a cause in particular that helps immigrants or refugees. But whatever matters to you is fine. If you would just do something, pass it on. I would be happy to mail it to you, as long as I have those copies, and I'll let you know if I'm out of them. So just if you were interested in that, just put your address in the contact section of the website, bethjacobsbooks.com, and yeah, I'll send out a book. I would love for you to read it if somebody wanted to.
That's so generous and so wonderful. And I hope some people take you up on it.
Me
And
too.
you're helping us all feel more generous
Yeah,
at a time when it's really, really important. So
really.
I want to
Yeah.
thank you again for this wonderful, wonderful sharing of your poems. And you made my morning. So
Likewise. You are so generous of a poet's heart. Thank you. Thank
thank
you very
you.
much.